Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be upgrading the rear sway bar on my F3340i, and we are going with the H&R sway bars. So I want to give a huge shout out to H&R for coming on board and partnering with me on my build. These sway bars are the biggest on the market, they're extremely robust, and they're solid instead of hollow compared to the stock sway bars, so it should be a lot stronger, a lot stiffer, and it will have a lot of additional benefits to prepare me for my next track day. Now, I am doing both the front and rear sway bar, so if you want to see the opposite DIY, I will put a link down in the description so that you can find that as well. But for this video, we're just going to show you how to install the rear sway bar. So hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So the first thing we're going to do is jack up the car. I have it jacked up on all four corners because I'm doing some other work as well, but you can probably get away with just jacking up the rear. And then you're going to want to remove your rear wheels. You're going to need to do that in order to access the end links on the sway bar. So go ahead and get those out of the way. Next, we're going to remove your CatBack exhaust. And so the first thing you're going to remove is this clamp that's attaching the downpipe onto the midpipe. So you use like a deep 13mm socket to loosen that. And also, if you go right next to it, there should be an additional nut that's holding it onto the exhaust hanger that's attached onto the transmission. I don't have it on my car, but go ahead and loosen that nut as well. Then we're going to go back by the muffler, and there are two additional exhaust hangers. So you're going to loosen both of those, one on the left side, one on the right. They should both be 13mm nuts as well. And then you'll finally be able to drop and remove the CatBack exhaust.
Next, we're going to remove this exhaust heat shield. It's held on by a bunch of these flat nuts. They're 10mm nuts, but they're really loose. I kind of just unscrew them by hand, as you can see. But if they're a little bit tighter for you, grab your socket wrench and go ahead and unscrew them. There should be 6 total. And then you're going to need to move some of the other panels out of the way. You might have to bend it a little bit, but you're just going to pull that whole exhaust shield down and get it out of the way so you can see your drive shaft. Next, you're going to remove these 2 bolts that are holding the drive shaft center housing in place. You might need to bend the heat shield back a little bit to get better access, but they're just 2 13mm bolts, so unscrew those and that should allow you to lower the drive shaft.
Now moving forward, just know that everything you see me do will need to be done on both sides of the car. I'm just going to show you on one, but know that you'll have to do it on the other as well. So the first thing we're going to do here is pull back the fender liner because there are a couple connectors that need to be disconnected so that we can lower the subframe. So when you pull it back, you'll see a different number of plugs depending on how many options your car has. I have 3 on the right side of the car and 2 on the left. But just unplug everything, and it wouldn't hurt to take a picture or a video for reference so you know how to plug them all back in when you're done. Now, I'm not 100% sure you'll have to do this, so feel free to try without this step if you want, but the BMW manual recommends removing the upper control arm from your hub. So I believe this was an 18mm socket, and you can see I'm using my premium chromium impact rated 18mm socket here. To remove this bolt, it just unscrews and then the control arm will pop up. Next, we're going to remove these covers underneath the rear. The first thing you'll do is remove these little pop rivets, and it basically has a push pin in the middle and then a bigger plug on the outside. So pop out the pins. You might need like a flathead screwdriver or something depending on your car, and then you can use a regular trim tool to remove those push pins, or in my case, you can see it was a little bit stubborn and flat, so I just pulled it out with the fender liner to get it fully removed. Next, you have these plastic torque screws, and just keep in mind the threads on them aren't very reliable, so on this case, I'm able to unscrew one, but on the other, it just kept spinning, so you might either need to add a little bit of tension to it to make it unscrew, or you can just use the trim tool again or a screwdriver and just pop it out. Then at the back of the trim, you have one last 10mm screw. Mine was pretty loose, but if yours is a little bit tighter, you might need to use a socket wrench. But go ahead and remove that screw, and then you'll be able to fully remove this trim panel. Now, I know it's a little bit difficult to see from this angle, but there should be two E14 screws holding the front of these tension struts in place. Again, we're going to be lowering the entire subframe, so you need to remove the tension strut in order to do that. So loosen both of the E14 screws and fully remove those. And now we're ready to actually lower the subframe. So before you move forward, just make sure that you have a jack or something underneath the diff or your subframe to hold it all up, and that will make sure that it doesn't lower unexpectedly. And then we have 4 different bolts that we need to address. So the first 2 we're going to remove are the ones towards the back of the car. Go ahead and unscrew those, but after you've removed it, thread it back in a couple turns. That will make sure that the subframe can basically hang from these bolts, because we're not going to completely drop it. We just want to lower it enough so that we can remove the sway bar. Then on the front, right back at the tension strut, these are going to be completely removed. So go ahead, grab your E-Torx again. You'll probably need a breaker bar. As you can see, both of them, I needed a breaker bar to break them free. And then you can use your socket wrench to completely remove those bolts and remove the tension struts. And now at this point, you can slowly lower your jack, and that will let the subframe hang from those rearward bolts until you get access to the sway bar. Once it's lowered enough, you should have plenty of access to the sway bar mounts. You're going to need an E12 socket in order to remove the screws that are holding the mounting bracket in place. Then you can kind of peel off the mounting bracket and also remove the sway bar bushing. And then the last thing we're going to do is remove the end link. And I know a lot of people do this first, but I needed the sway bar to be loose so I could move it out of the way in order for my tools to reach. Then you're going to use a 16mm box wrench on the nut and a T30 on the actual end link. So push that inside of it, and that'll be your counter hold in order to loosen the nut from the sway bar. It's very difficult, especially if your car has any rust or anything. So just take your time, and you should be able to loosen that and get it off. Now, the sway bar itself isn't too difficult to remove. Just take your time. If you have a buddy, it might be a little bit easier, but I basically just went back and forth. Rotate it if you need to, and this is also where removing that upper control arm can give you a little more clearance to pull it out. But just pay attention to both sides. If it gets hung up on something, switch sides, rotate it, and then you should be able to pull it straight out from either the driver or the passenger side wheel well. So here's a quick comparison between the stock sway bar and the H&R. I was actually surprised to see how thin the stock sway bar is. Obviously the H&R is much thicker. It isn't adjustable, but it still should get the job done. And also another nice thing is these bushings are a composite, so they don't actually need to be lubricated. You don't have to grease them or anything. They just work right out of the box. So let's go ahead and put this in the car. Now, installation is just the reverse of removal. You're going to need to take your time again, installing the sway bar, rotate it around as needed, and then, mount it back onto the end links, mount it onto the subframe, lift that up, and then bolt the subframe back in place. I will have all the torque specs down in the description for your reference, but in general, I think the install wasn't too bad, especially because you don't need to completely drop the subframe. You just lower it enough to access the sway bar. Also, I do want to mention a common thing people think is that you need adjustable end links in order to do this job, and you definitely don't. The sway bars rotate, so they fit the stock end links just fine. If you can't install it, you may need to jack up one of the control arms a little bit, or just make sure that both wheels are in the air if you're only doing one side at the time, and you should have no issues with the stock end links. So I think this is something most people can do on jack stands, and the benefits were definitely noticeable. I'll be giving a review on that in a future video, as well as taking my car to the track. So I think that's pretty much it for this one. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.